Just give us a moment as the recording starts. Right. Uh, our discussion today will be on the role of the Sylphs in the rape of the lock. And we shall begin by arguing that one of the most important departures or innovations that Pope makes in the rape of the lock is the replacement of the epic machinery by the presence of the Sylphs. The Sylphs not only add to the mock heroic quality of the poem, they also breathe in an aesthetic dimension, often combining the latest discoveries in science, in pointing out the follies and pride of women. They deflect part of the satire from Belinda, but Pope's presentation reveals a deep patriarchal misogynist bias about the Sylphs. This is our introduction. So, substituting the epic machinery, mock heroic, satire against female vanity, deflecting the satire against Belinda, and the aesthetic impact and uniqueness to the poem. He will then talk about the sources. The term sylph was coined by the Swiss-German physician and alchemist Paracelsus in the 16th century to describe an air spirit in his scheme of elemental spirits. Paracelsus also talked about the Gnomes, who represented the earth, salamanders, who represented fire, and undines, who represented water. These ideas were adopted subsequently in the Rosicrucian philosophy and in Hermetic and occult literature. The Rosicrucian idea was built on the esoteric truths of the ancient past and argued that human beings are denied the vision of the elements inhabiting the perfect creatures, who are innumerable people having human shape, from the knowledge of whom man is excluded. Pope's immediate source was Villiers' pseudo-novel Contes de Gabalis, was published in 1670 in French and translated into English by Ayers in 1680. Contes de Gabalis presented these minuscule creatures and started a tradition of occult lore. However, Pope was also borrowing from more indigenous sources like fairies and elves of popular folklore, and literary characters like Shakespeare's Ariel or the fairies in A Midsummer Night's Dream. One must note, however, that the comic presentation of the Sylphs, their introduction within the mock heroic, and the laughter that is directed against them suggests that Pope held the Rosicrucian doctrine or any occult philosophy with great ridicule as completely created through unreason. We need to talk also about the different categories of the mock heroic machinery, including or mirroring the four elements, the Sylphs representing airy substance and marked by light and gaiety, the Gnomes representing earth and standing for mischief, the Salamanders representing fire and fiery attitudes, and the Nymph representing water. Each of them, or each of these categories, referred to various kinds of women whose temperaments were defined by various elements, and they were formed only after they passed into ether. Pope is deliberately using a military metaphor to suit the mock heroic technique, whereby the Sylphs are described in Homeric terms as the light militia of the lower sky and are former coquettes or unmarried flirtatious women transformed after their death. Their major function lies in guarding the purity of melting maids and making them resist masculine advances. Contemporary critics of Pope suggested that the Sylphs perform no real function other than adding imaginative qualities. They do not guard Belinda in any significant way. And Pope's contemporary Addison had advised him to delete the machinery. One particular area of interest is Pope's use of contemporary science, especially Newtonian optics, to describe the Sylphs. This is a rare example where a poet transfers a scientific theory into such aesthetic merit. The Sylphs dip their pinions in the painted bow, referring to the various colors, their transparent forms, and their fluid bodies are half dissolved in light and therefore act as surfaces or act as refracting surfaces where colors change whenever they wave their wings. Therefore, Pope was using his friend Newton's thesis to add great beauty to the poem. The most obvious function of the Sylphs is to add to the mock heroic quality, contrasting the mighty gods who fought with men in the Trojan War to the minute, airy substances who are microscopic. This art of diminution, however, is present at every stage of the poem and releases the laughter, especially in episodes like the sylph being cut into two and uniting, being perched on the cards at the game of Omber, or directing the snuff and causing sneezes in the epic battle. This continuous movement between the mighty illusion and the ridiculous effect greatly embellishes the mock heroic quality, an example of which can be found in the ridiculous punishments like being stopped in a vial or being transfixed with pins. Pope also adds liquid consonants in names like momentilla or sibilants in names like crispissa or zephyretta, adding to the poetic quality of the text. The more satiric purpose of the Sylphs is to highlight female folly and pride. Pope once wrote that every woman at heart is a rake, within quotes. Every woman at heart is a rake, and that most women have no character at all. Pope's target in this poem was aristocratic women of leisure who flirted throughout the day and radiated sexuality, thereby causing social disturbance. Pope suggests that women are naturally promiscuous and that all they think about is their own appearance and are therefore extremely vain. In presenting the Sylphs, Pope creates generations of women who were like Belinda, considering succeeding vanities, and therefore they are a manifestation of Pope's general satire against women. In doing so, they deflect part of the satire from Belinda and allow her beauty to be admired more than the satire. The presentation of the Sylphs, although extremely aesthetic and comic, is therefore marked by a deep sense of misogyny. Pope considers women vain, shallow, and promiscuous. Their heart is like a vacant toy shop where old impertinence is expelled by new. While the minute world of the Sylphs is crafted with great light and extreme beauty, their presentation is in fact quite dark and reveals Pope's disregard for women. Equally important is the role of the Gnomes, who represent mischievous women. Umbriel's visit to the cave of spleen, with Pain and Megrim on the two sides of the queen, offer a glimpse into the 18th century presentation of the hysterical women. Contemporary science saw the female body as unregulated and hysterical, associated with chaos and the lack of reason. The role of Thalestris, who fans Belinda's fires as her bosom is filled with unnatural rage, also presents the woman as impulsive and causing social chaos. Thus, the Sylphs, Gnomes, and the Salamanders present three versions of womanhood: the flirtatious female, the hysterical female, and the Amazonian woman, each of whom is liable to cause social chaos. For Pope, therefore, women are an unpredictable, irrational, and dangerous entity within society, and he presents a binary through Clarissa, who advocates good conduct, good nature, and passive submission, since painted or not painted, beauty shall fade. Clarissa emerges as the patriarchal fantasy of passive womanhood, and her speech, therefore, becomes Pope's advice for female behavior. And the Sylphs, however beautiful and aesthetic, are comic subjects of ridicule and lead to social quarrels. To conclude, in 1712, when Pope had asked for Addison's opinion, he had been advised to delete the epic machinery. Pope retained the Sylphs, providing an imaginative masterstroke whereby within the mock heroic structure an entire possibility of aesthetics was liberated. The Sylphs, with their minute presence, heighten the comic and mock heroic effect, contrasting the mighty with the trivial. Apart from the mock heroic, they provide the poem with significant aesthetic and imaginative grasp, forever tickling the imagination of the reader. However, their primary function is to act as Pope's target for the satire against women as idle, vain, proud, and promiscuous. Thus, apparently, the Sylphs may be objects of great beauty, but in reality, they represent the deep misogyny of the period and the patriarchal anxieties about female agency. That should be all about the discussion of the Sylphs. I'll stop sharing at this point.